As most any cave story player is most likely aware, there are lots of secrets hidden in the game Cave Story. In this video, I will assume that you are familiar with the first 3 endings to the game Cave Story. But did you know that there's a 4th ending? That's right. Pixel included an alternate path that lets you get an even better ending. Now you might be aware of that silly video in which you can apparently achieve a 4th ending by jumping far enough off the edge of the outer wall, and the Doctor deciding instead to start a television series that would air 24/7 and Kazuma leaving without you, and everyone else on the island dying of boredom for no apparent reason, and being congratulated for being a noob and breaking the game, and then finally being told that it's safe to turn off your computer in a Windows 98 fashion. Whatever ideas that video may give you, bear in mind that it is fake. No such ending exists in Cave Story. The same thing goes for that other silly video in which you can apparently get the true best ending by being careful not to jump too far off the edge of the island when you're supposed to do so with Sue. However, it turns out that it's just you're never seen again, so it's fake as well. This ending, however, unlike the others, is real. Achieving it will involve saving King and Toroko along the way, as well as saving the Cullens, and in the end going home with the Sakamotos along with Curly Brace. The first step towards getting the 4th ending goes back to when you first arrive at the Sand Zone. Now if you walk right up to Curly Brace, your chance to get the 4th ending is shot, because if you go up to that tile there and try and shoot, it will be solid and blocked off. If, however, you do not walk up to Curly, then one of those tiles will be shootable, and when you break through it, you'll be able to enter a tunnel that, by going through it, allows you to emerge on the top from 2 shootable blocks that previously seemed to have no significance. And then, you'll be able to beat Curly to her house. Since you beat Curly to her house, she's now not in the Sand Zone residence when you get there, and you'll be able to talk the Cullens into realizing that you're on their side. Even though Curly shows up and regards you as hostile as usual, the Cullens know you're good this time and prevent a fight from breaking out. Now after the alternate cutscene has ended, you're going to want to collect Jenka's puppies as usual, aside from the fact that you want to get the sleeping puppy last and make sure that you don't give it to Jenka and instead take it with you into the Sand Zone storehouse. Now the cutscene in the Sand Zone storehouse takes place as usual at first, until Balrog starts force-feeding flowers to Toroko and is interrupted by Jenka's puppy. Why does this only work if you take the sleeping puppy with you? This is most likely because if you open up your inventory while you have her, it says that she spends most of her time sleeping, but that her dreams have been known to, quote, portend the future. Because of this, it is entirely possible that the puppy could have had a dream in which King and Toroko were killed, and then was motivated to help save them. If you did everything right, then Toroko will respond to King telling him that she's okay. Now even though Misery teleports them out in this cutscene, they are later on revealed to still be alive. And despite the turn of events, you still get pounced on by Balrog and teleported to the labyrinth by Misery. Except this time without the blade. Now the dialogue in the clinic is slightly altered in that it now suggests that Curly is not quite as badly wounded as she normally is, in which she has to fight both you and Misery in the Sand Zone. This is even further implied by the fact that Curly leaves to go to the boulder chamber before you even give the cure-all to Dr. Jiro. Speaking of which, you actually don't want to give the cure-all to Dr. Jiro. Instead, you want to give it to Professor Booster before going into the boulder chamber with Curly. After being healed, Professor Booster will take out a fresh pair of glasses and put them on, and sincerely thank you for saving his life. However, he does take back the booster which he gave you, preventing you temporarily from reaching the boulder chamber. He will then head down to the teleporter and start to repair it. Talk to him a few more times until he lets you have the booster back and go up to Curly and notify her that a quicker path can be found through the labyrinth. Then after Curly and Professor Booster get acquainted, the teleporter will have been repaired and you can use it to get back to Arthur's house. Even though safety is still playing instead of Pulse, the message by Kazuma saying to head for the egg corridor will be there. After coming through the teleporter, Professor Booster explains how Curly still didn't fully trust him and insisted that he go first, explains how he got tossed into the labyrinth, takes back the booster version 0.8, and tells you to go check up on the Mimigas and that he would in the meantime welcome Curly in when she came through the teleporter. When you come back into the Mimiga village, it will be quiet in the same manner in which it usually is after coming out of the labyrinth, aside from the fact that there is still one Mimiga that remains. Head over to the Yamashita farm to find that Sandame is still tending to the flowers, oblivious to the disappearance of all of the other Mimigas. Sure enough, he had no idea what was going on and is shocked to find that the other Mimigas have been taken. Then, Misery shows up and teleports Sandame to the plantation with the rest of the Mimigas. She will once again flee from the scene, but this time promising that she will eventually fight you. After reporting back to Professor Booster, he will connect to the plantation and allow you to teleport there. Then head over to jail number 1. If you've done everything correctly, then King and Toroko will be in jail with Sue, Jack, and Mahin. Walk up to King to get his attention, and then he and everyone else in the jail cell will realize that you've come. Then, King will tell you to go get his blade from the sand zone and that he'll use it to break through the bars. Now head back to the sand zone storehouse to get King's blade that he dropped when he was teleported out by Misery. Now while you do get to wield the blade, there are 2 catches to this. One being that you have to return it to King, and 2, that it keeps leveling down. So it's impossible to get it to level 3. Now that you have the blade, walk up to King and give it to him, and then he will break through the bars of the jail cell. Sue will then lead you and the other Mimigas to the hideout where Momorin is. After catching up with each other on the ongoing events, Momorin tells you that the first thing she needs for the rocket is a booster. After this has happened, Kazuma, Booster, and Curly will show up at the storehouse with Aito. If you talk to Professor Booster, he will give you the booster version 2.0 so that you can build the rocket. After you give the booster to Momorin, the fetch quest for the rocket will take place pretty much as usual. Now when you take a rest after collecting all of the parts, you get a memory coming back to you telling you that your name is Quote, instead of having Curly tell it to you. Unlike before, it is not possible to go up to the Doctor's throne with the Mimiga mask still on. The events from the last cave up through the fight with the Doctor are more or less the same, aside from a few modified bits of dialogue, and when you get to the fight with the Undead Core, Sue does not take part as she is down below with everyone else. After the fight with the Undead Core, you are shown a scene where everyone except Curly Brace is trapped inside of the storehouse, most likely to die soon. Now go through the sacred grounds and defeat Balos as usual, but then when Balrog says that he'll take you and Curly anywhere you want, Curly realizes that the Sakamotos and the Mimigas are still on the island, and requests that he take you back to the island to help them. Then, a long cutscene takes place in which everything is explained to everyone about the curse placed on Balrog and Misery. At a certain point, Jack reveals to Curly that during the time that Mimigas were being taken by Misery, he hid the colons in a safe place. And finally, the 4th ending takes place with Aito, Professor Booster, Quote, Curly Brace, and the Sakamotos leaving all together for home. If you got the 4th ending, then there are slightly altered credit art images to accommodate the events, one of them being that Sue is no longer in the mouth of the dragon, and another being where Sue is not a part of the fight with the Undead Core. Also, in the ending scene with Jinka and her newborn puppies, instead of Professor Booster showing up, Misery does. You are also shown an epilogue scene in which King and Jack are watching the Colons play with Toroko. And then after the credits have ended, when Quote calls all of his friends down, it's the right combination of people. This truly is the best ending for Cave Story. Now believe it or not, due to how cryptic the first step was to getting the 4th ending, NICALiS was completely oblivious to this when they released Cave Story for the Wii. Despite this, it is still possible to break through that shootable tile in the sand zone. However, since NICALiS had no idea that such content resided in the game, there are glitches when getting the fourth ending. One of them being that for all extra content found exclusively in the path for the fourth ending, all of the dialogue uses the Aeon Genesis translation. Also, whenever items are mentioned, there are equal signs on both sides of the text for the item. Also, if you do this with the new graphics, then there's no graphic item for Professor Booster's glasses. Also, there are inconsistencies between whether the dialogue starts on the top line of the message box or the middle line, like in the Aeon Genesis translation and unlike the NICALiS translation. Glitches of a similar nature were present in the DSi port, and in Cave Story 3D, this ending just flat out didn't exist. One day, Pixel finally communicated to NICALiS that he actually added a fourth ending and that he experienced all of these glitches when playing the ports. On top of a lot of things that were fixed in Cave Story Plus in contrast to Cave Story WiiWare, they also fixed all of the glitches in getting the fourth ending. For starters, they made their own translation for the new content in the fourth ending. And now there are no equal signs on either side of the text for each item, and there is now a double resolution graphic item for Professor Booster's glasses. On top of that, message boxes now allow characters to extend longer than the original Cave Story engine could handle, but the new one can. Finally, all of the extra credit art images in the WiiWare version were single resolution, whereas in Cave Story Plus, they were made double resolution if you had new graphics enabled. Now that NICALiS was aware that the game had 4 endings, when they announced Cave Story Plus in their blog post, they put 4 unique endings as one of the features, as opposed to 3 that they announced before. This caused quite a bit of confusion among players who thought they had seen the game in and out, and even started a topic on the Cave Story tribute site forums. Instead of discovering the fourth ending that actually exists, people came to the conclusion that there is no extra content and that they were simply referring to the Mimiga Mask ending. Hopefully, now that some light has been shed on the subject, people will come to see the honesty in NICALiS' claim.